by owning a little bit is a good way to start that journey and to do a minimal portfolio allocation just to be aware of crypto?
I think so, especially if you look at my own writings evolution on it over time. It went from, 2017, like, it's speculative, be careful with it, to early 2020, it was like, this is worth having a small percentage of your portfolio in. And then to later saying like, I think basically that zero is not the right number anymore. And that the right number depends wildly depending on how researched they are, how high conviction they are, what their risk and volatility tolerance is. So I think there's no right number, but I do think that it's essentially at the point where the right number is not zero, and that it is something that people should be familiar with, even if it's a number that does not really impact their life, right? Just to get familiar with the technology. Even something just as buying it and then transferring it to a mobile wallet and realizing you own this, you self-custody it, you can send it to anyone in the world and you're not going through a centralized third party. It's kind of crazy to think about when you actually do it in person. It's different than any owning a security, for example. And so I've kind of focused on that evolution over time. And I also often emphasize dollar cost averaging, right? So instead of people often worry about what if I buy it and it goes down 50%, or what if and I just find that dollar cost averaging makes sense. And the culture, especially in the Bitcoin space, is kind of shifted more towards that model where instead of treating it like a speculation, you treat it like a savings. And so by dollar cost averaging, you lower your like mental connection to a specific entry price, and you become kind of price insensitive, and you say, look, I'm going to put this whatever percentage of my portfolio into this, and then just add a little bit every week, every month, whatever the case may be, and you just kind of desensitize yourself for the price. And so for me, for example, I have a certain allocation. I add to it on a regular basis. And so when we had, for example, what was it, a 56% correction in mid 2021, because my position size was appropriate and because I had bought at a much lower price, even from that correction level, and because I was just dollar cost averaging in, I was like, wow, the money that I'm putting in is going to buy more Bitcoins now than it was going to buy back in April when it was higher. And so that's just how I approach it. And I think that's a healthy mindset um, as you kind of learn more about it.
Yeah, and that's something that I know Jack Dorsey's really set up with the Square and with the Cash App and all that. There's a lot of technology now that allows people to do that. And again, when it's an increasing value asset, that strategy also does look good over time. What is the right percentage, Lynn, of people to hold? If it's not zero, and it's not 50%, or it's not 30%, what is that in between?
I think it's really different. I mean, a 25-year-old tech professional probably has a very different ideal number than an 80-year-old retiree, for example, that doesn't really get it, right? So, but many of them do get it. I have readers that are 75, 80, 85 that own Bitcoin, and they fully get it. So it really depends on their personality, their experience, what other assets they have. So I think there's literally a wildly different number. There's also the case where there might be a difference between how much you put in versus how much you maintain. And so, for example, my allocation is actually quite big, but it's because of appreciation, right? So it's simply because I have not rebalanced. I have not sold and then realized all sorts of capital gains, taxes, and things like that. And so a lot of times you'll hear people say what their percentage is, and it's actually quite big, but people should realize that most of them didn't put that much of their percentage in up front. They didn't just say, I'm going to put 20% into Bitcoin. It's more like they put 5% in and it became 20% over time, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and so the percentage of someone who's worked up to that percentage is a very different number than what someone should put in when they're just starting out. So I think the first step is start small, because there's technical risks, right? You risk losing it if you don't know what you're doing. So you buy on an exchange, or you buy on one of those dollar cost averaging services like Swan Bitcoin, or a place like that, whatever is kind of accessible in your country, and you start dollar cost averaging into that, and then you can eventually take custody of it, and you learn more about it, and then if you'll naturally start to research more, And then you'll be able to answer your own question for how much you can hold because you'll be more knowledgeable on it. You'll have a conviction on it or you won't, and therefore you'll be able to determine what percentage makes sense for you. I always find that some degree of diversification is helpful. I never go all in on anything, just for mental clarity, really. And so when something falls 56% in a couple months, it's literally you lose zero sleep if you know if you manage your position size well and if you know what you own.